Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the BackStory podcast. I'm very excited today to bring you a very dear old friend of ours. Barb and I have met with him and his wife, Dina, for quite some time, quite a few years. It's been really interesting to watch his growth in this area of spirituality and some of the incredible things that he's been doing. So I'm very honored to share with you today Tom T. Moore. Tom has been a regular contributor, like I have been, in the Sedona Journal. I'm not quite sure how long, but we'll find out in just a minute. But he's been doing some incredible work here for quite some time, and I'm just very honored to bring Tom in. So, Tom, how you doing?
Doing great, Steve. So great to be back with you again, and it's been a while, and happy to see you're doing well, and let's give the folks some interesting things today.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I am going to ask you some questions. Obviously, we met a long time ago. I don't even know how many years ago it was, but we met a long time ago. We had dinner one time with Barb and I had dinner with you and Dina, and just it was wonderful. I remember that, and I remember that everything kind of shifted for both of us after that. We both kind of went on a little bit of a skyrocket, if you will, and life changed quite a bit. And as I mentioned to you before, most of the people that watch this are teachers and healers in their own right, so they're very interested in most of the time how you got there, what happened to you, what took place, and how you got started in this whole process. So let me start with that question: how'd you get started? How'd this work for you?
Okay, I'll sort of give you three points in my life that were really significant.
Cool.
First, I was reading the Sedona Journal one day, and there was a channeled article by Robert Shapiro, and in it, Zosh, he was channeling, said there said you can request benevolent outcomes in your life. Well, at that time, I'd tried the law of attraction that wasn't working very well. And so I said, that sounds interesting. It just rang a bell with me. And so I started trying it out, saying these benevolent outcomes out loud, testing it out, and it worked perfectly. And I'd never been able to say that by any modality that I'd ever used. So I I continued on from there and eventually wound up even writing some articles for the Sedona Journal. And uh, but the second thing that happened was that we went to see an event that you and Barbara held many years ago. This was before even my maybe the first article, I can't remember. And uh, and you were doing these 2-minute readings at breaks. And so when it was my turn, I said, we stepped up there and you said, Tom, you almost died recently. And I said, no, I don't think so. And Dina, my wife, stepped in and said, yes, do you remember Ken, where you had diverticulitis and lost 40% of your blood? Oh, yeah, I forgot. and, and, and so you said, well, what's your plan B? And so I thought for a minute and I said, I want to share and help everybody with the general, well, pardon me, this is before, to help everybody with benevolent outcomes. And I said that out loud. So then fast forward on a ways, and Dina and I went to a seminar held in Sedona, Arizona, with Dick Sutphin, and he was it was called a seminar to increase your psychic abilities. And so he would put us under and into these light uh, alternate states, and we would do certain things. On the second day, he he wanted to put us under and have us try automatic writing. Well, at that time, I had uh, a shaman by the name of Real Reveals the Mysteries that Robert Shapiro had channeled for me, and so I decided I wanted to see if I could contact him. And so when he put us under, I said, "Reveals the Mysteries, are you there?" And he said, yes, I am, Tom. And I said, wow, this is great. And he went on to tell me, he said, Tom, you have reincarnated into this time period to reintroduce people to the gentle way. So he gave me the name of my first book the very first
Wow.
time I ever spoke with him. And then he said, you're going to write books. And I said, no, 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 I'm a business guy. Um, I, I thought I was going to be doing international film and TV program distribution till I retired. And he said, no, books. So I said, okay. And so I wrote my first book, The Gentle Way. And uh, then he, but on my website that I created, it was www.thegentlewaybook, singular.com, because I never thought I'd ever be able
Right.
to write another book. And here I am with my seventh and eighth books coming out in a couple of weeks. So that's how it
Incredible.
started.
Incredible. That's amazing. Yeah, I remember seeing some of your earlier writings in the Sedona Journal were all about benevolent outcomes. And
Yeah.
I have to say, I didn't understand it completely until you started writing about it. I had heard, I had read some of the things from Robert Shapiro about benevolent outcomes and how people, but when you put your focus on it and started writing some of those things, it just gained a whole new meaning to me about how that was coming. And
Well,
and
yeah,
you,
because you're doing these out loud. And the way I understand it now is that when you request these benevolent outcomes out loud, it uh, eventually scientists will be able to understand the power of the verbal spoken word. And
yep,
that's what's happened when you request these benevolent outcomes. It goes directly to whatever you want to call it, source, universe, God, creator. I like to call it creator. It's handled by your guardian angels, I'm told. And and if it's within your soul contract, uh,
right.
then you will have that request granted.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, the group has mentioned something very similar. They've said for many years, they said, you're creator beings, you're all going to create things no matter what you do, but something is really magical when you speak your voice and those vibrations come around and go in your own ears. That's when many of the magics really start, is you actually
Yes.
ground it in a whole different way that way. So that's very
And it's
magical.
it's called magical today, but I think someday in the future, scientists will be able to prove the power of this verbal voice. Because I've even
They're getting
told, that the pyramids were built by having groups of 300 men, women, and children chanting a certain um, sound, a certain chant that lifted these huge bags of cement that were that were then transported to the pyramids and poured in place, and that's how they built the pyramids. That's
amazing.
one story I'm telling.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, I think we're finding out a lot of stuff about that. They've discovered the tunnel under the Giza pyramids, and how deep that starts to go is just absolutely amazing. Things well beyond it. One other thing I want to ask you about, because I've seen the progression of the books that you've written, the progression of your work in the Sedona Journal, because those are really the only two things I get to see. I don't get to follow people's websites.
Yeah. And,
But
and
I've
by the way,
also,
in March, I submitted my 200th column to the Sedona
did you
Journal.
really?
Yeah,
Incredible. Incredible. Well, I think we just celebrated 20 years. I have no idea how many that is, but
yeah.
but it's
I've been
been
numbering.
it's
That's the only way I know.
yeah, it's been incredible. So it's just been, and they're wonderful people. Sedona,
Yep,
Melody, and everybody involved, and Monica, and they've just incredible people
exactly.
that
Yeah.
really have the Earth's interest in humanity at heart here. It's just very
Yes.
magical people. So one of the things that I have experienced recently, I have always had a resistance of talking about ETs. I have no idea what it was. I mean, all you have to do is look in the sky if you realize how many galaxies are really out there, there's of course there's other beings around and so forth, but I've always had this innate resistance about talking about it until recently. And I know that was one of the gifts that you did. In fact, you wrote a whole book about it, did you not?
Yes, that came out in 2013, and then I've continued to ask even probably thousands of questions since then. Um, I was in 2008. I was talking to my guardian angel Theo, who I named after he told me that humans don't have the vocal cords to pronounce angelic names, and that I could call him Tom, Dick, or Harry, but Tom, since that's my name, would be a little hard in my meditation. So I thought for a while and came up with the name Theo. And so we were talking one day about some ruins on the other side of the world, and he said, you're going to get to see those one day. And I said, oh yeah. He said, yeah, there's an ET that's monitoring our conversation, and if you'd like, you can talk to him. And I was floored because I thought I was having this private conversation with my own guardian angel, and it was like what you would call in the old days a party line. And
Yeah.
so,
You're
so
dating yourself now. Not
I
many
know
people
I'm
know what a
dating
party
myself.
line is
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah. We probably have to explain it to all these
Yeah,
people that
exactly.
have never heard out in the country for farms. They would have one line, and anyone could pick up the line and listen in as a party line. So anyway, I said, well, no, let me think about it. And so a couple of weeks later, I'd come up with questions to ask, and that's kind of how it started. Turns out he's a member of my soul cluster. After 800 lives on Earth, he with an interest in soul interest in exploration and designing villages and towns from the very beginning. He is a member of First Contact uh, uh, group of four team, and they contact uh, emergent emerging civilizations
Hmm.
uh, before they get to the point where they're going into space.
Interesting. And one of your books is about this first contact, was it not?
Yes, and he told
Amazing.
me, he said, Tom, I'm on the same uh, I have the very same conditions that you have with Theo and anybody else you speak
Right.
to. You have to ask specific questions. You can't just say, "Oh, tell me what you look like, Antura." And so, I've had to come up with every single little question about his appearance. And the one thing I forgot to ask in the book was whether he had a tail or not. He's an amphibian from the
Oh,
Sirius
really?
B star system
Right.
from Nomo, that water planet in the Sirius B solar system. And he actually has a small triangular tail. But it was years before I realized I'd forgotten to ask him that.
The information that the group has been coming through with this, now that I have kind of relaxed and gotten over my whatever that was, my emotional blocks about it for some reason, have been really fascinating. And they basically say that we've had so much help on this planet getting started, especially in the beginning of humanity,
Yes,
that we put a lot of these beings on pedestals and called them gods, called them
yes,
angels, called them all sorts of things. And there's a massive crossover between what we think of as angels and what we think of as ETs, and our whole belief systems have to kind of go out the window to really bring this. So that's absolutely incredible, magical. So tell me
yes.
about some of your other books. You've really focused a wide range of a plethora of subjects there. So tell me a little bit about them.
Sure. Well, and this comes back. I decided because there was no way I knew that I could ask enough questions uh, to uh, that I wanted to know that I couldn't think of, and so I'm told that I was the only person in the world that opened it up for anyone in the world to send me questions to ask in my meditative uh, states, meditative sessions. And so I've wound up asking over 30,000 questions. And and it just kind of leads me where it wants to lead me. Um, I one of the books, let's see if I can get it where there it goes. Atlantis and Lemuria started when I was saying, well, uh, reveals the mystery. Said I was to reintroduce the gentle way to this time period. How far back did it go? And I thought maybe 600 years or something like that. And and Theo said, "Oh, Tom, it dates all the way back to your Atlantean days, um, where." And I found out later I had 180 lives during the Atlantean days. And he
Oh my
said,
God.
"You were inspired to create the gentle way. You have 1 million followers." Now, this is during the time of Poseidon and 375 miles to the south, Aaron and the five little islands in a half moon below it. And and you were told by ETs that they were headed to destroy themselves in a final war. And so you migrated with 25,000 of your followers through Europe to Egypt. And in Egypt, there was a Egyptian princess that was told in her meditations that we were good people because the Egyptians were afraid the Atlanteans were going to conquer them again. They'd
Yeah,
done that fast. And
right.
so I was able to convince her we weren't. We just were there to find new lives. And so she helped us settle. And that Egyptian princess is my wife in this life. And in her next life, she's going back about 100 years after my life there, which was around 12,700 years ago. And she's going to be one of the early versions of a pharaoh, and I'm going to be her assistant. But that's a past life for me. I've already had that one. And so that's, of course,
Amazing.
the Egyptians don't admit to having that long a history due to their religious beliefs.
Right. Well, that's fascinating you say that because 12,700 years ago is just before the floods, just about
Yes,
100 years before the floods and the Younger Dryas and all the things that took place after that. That's
yes,
absolutely amazing.
exactly. And
Absolutely.
and when the Atlanteans destroyed themselves using laser weapons, um,
Hmm.
that caused the oceans of the world to rise 4,500 feet, and that was
Oh,
actually the time of Noah and his ark. It
right.
just didn't flood every single inch of the earth, only mostly the Mediterranean. And his ark came to rest at Mount Ararat on the lower slopes instead of the top of it.
Yeah, I know they keep thinking they found it, but they every time they come a little closer to it, it turns out to be something else or some shadows that are forming. But it's absolutely amazing. No, the even though that's a biblical story, it's actually covered in many religions. Not about Noah particularly, but the
Yes,
floods. The floods are covered in all sorts of earth histories and religions and so forth. And for lots of different reasons. One religion says we screwed up, we got greedy, we got too much into something else, and so forth. But nobody. I was born and raised in Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri, and when I went out in the backyard and did some digging, I could find seashells that were
yes,
there's no reason for
exactly.
them to ever be there. So yeah, it absolutely was.
And
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 it happened real
there's
quick.
not too far from me, there's a place called Rockwall, Texas, and there's actually a rock wall that I've asked about in one of my sessions, and it turned out there were a people that lived there a long time ago as the oceans were receding, and they built a
Yeah.
rock wall to prevent the oceans from destroying their crops or whatever. And then the oceans continued to recede, and they followed the oceans and were eventually uh, destroyed by a hurricane in the lower part of Texas. So there's
Incredible.
there's evidence, but it's so long ago that's
Yeah.
if you can
We,
imagine how
we,
long ago the oceans were receding.
well, even well before that, there's a lot of evidence that humans were even here during the Ice Age and even slightly before the Ice Age. So
Sure.
there's a lot of evidence that's showing up in different places, but we have no recorded history. We have no
Yeah.
recordings
So
or
and I
writings from
and I
those
was
times
told
other
that
than channels.
yeah, pardon me.
No,
I was told that 30,000 years ago, the Atlantean continent had a string of volcanoes right down the middle of the mid-Atlantic ridge, and they all exploded at the same time, and most of the continents sank, and the oceans rose 160 feet. So that was the first big, and of course, every single settlement along the shores of every continent of the
right.
world was wiped out. And then came the 45-foot one, and then after that, the Lemurians. And one day naturally I had to ask. I said, "Oh, have I ever had a life on Lemuria?" And Theo said, "Oh, Tom, you helped sink the continent."
that's
Oh,
that's what the group told me about Atlantis. They said I had some very good lives in Lemuria, but in Atlantis I was one of the ones that were responsible for the problem. So it could
no,
very well be.
sure.
That's amazing.
And look what we're doing now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so it turned out that I was a religious leader, and so I encouraged the leaders of my country. I think there's five or seven. You'd have to look at the book, and
Right.
uh, to drop hydrogen type bombs on two of the other countries, thinking they didn't have a way to respond, but they did, and that wound up destroying the whole continent. So
Hmm.
and the oceans rose 172 feet or so. So there's been three major ones. We've got
Yep.
we've got another small one coming up next year, where the oceans are going to rise 3 feet. But that's part of my conversations with Gaia, Soul of the Earth book.
That, and tell me about Gaia. You've written a lot about how the spirit of Gaia has brought come into the earth. You've told some really interesting stories about that. I think you wrote a book about Gaia, did you not?
Yeah, well, that's the one that's coming out in a
Oh,
couple of
that's the
weeks.
one. Okay, all right. Let me show them real quick. There we go. This is
There
the
it
new
is.
book. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
two
Excellent. Well,
two
tell us
volumes are
about this.
coming out at the same time.
Oh, okay. So you got two of them coming out. Awesome.
Yeah. Volume one and volume two. Otherwise, it would have been over 650 pages. And
Yeah,
mutually agreed that was too large and would be too high a price. So we split it into two.
good, good. So that's amazing. And this is all covered in this next book that's coming out.
Yes.
Awesome, incredible.
So,
So tell me a little bit about that. How did Gaia decide? I mean, Gaia is an entity, obviously. Well, the Earth is a living, breathing, sentient entity. Is that what you mean by Gaia? Kind of
Gaia
like the
and Soul of
oversoul?
the Earth. Okay. I like to call him creator because I don't think God, I think God is a limiting word.
I
Um,
agree.
And so I call him creator because there's this magnificent being that loves variety. And I kept being told that over and over again. And finally, I have a little understanding about why creator likes variety. So creator created our universe, and it was 25 billion years ago, not 13.5. But uh, soon, I'm told, uh, you know, that astronomers will see that with the equipment we have present day, they will say that our universe is 20 billion years old, but it's actually 25. We just don't have the equipment to see that far
That far
back.
into the, yeah,
And
yeah,
so at about that time when Creator had just, I call it the small bang theory because the Creator created several hundred galaxies, all tightly packed together, and Gaia showed up wanting to be a quantum master, and so the theater, pardon me, Creator said, well. I suggest that you ensoul this asteroid, and in this asteroid, you visit all several hundred uh, of the galaxies that Creator has created so far. They were tightly packed together. So for the next several million years, that's what Gaia did, going from galaxy to galaxy, talking to the souls that ensouled the suns, the moons, the planets, and and the people that were attracted to have lives on those planets. So that's what Gaia did, because she basically said she wanted to become a quantum master, and eventually she was assigned to Earth, and uh, somewhere before the Earth experiment, as it's called,
right.
where the creator of our universe wanted to see if the four negative energies that existed but had never been worked with over trillions of other creations by other creators, they'd all been created in the 10 positive energies, including our universe. So the creator of our universe created a special space-time continuum that just surrounded our solar system, and all within these four negative energies. And our souls, who had the highest vibrations of anyone on the planets, volunteered to take part in the Earth experiment. And that's what we're doing.
Fascinating. And you're absolutely right. We discovered a lot with the Hubble telescope, and now with the James Webb telescope, astrophysicists are coming up with all sorts of things that the group was talking about years ago. They were
Yeah,
talking about time being an illusion. Now astrophysicists are saying we think time's an illusion. It's a construct of humanity, and
it is.
all these fascinating things that they're starting to discover, and
And
absolutely amazing.
two more things these astronomers are going to discover, I'm told, with the
That
James Webb, is that they're going to see. We think that all the stars in our sky, night sky, are all our universe. But if you look sort
no,
of
no,
towards Sagittarius, and don't hold me exactly to that, but up in that direction, um, that's the next universe over. There's three universes that are next to ours. Two of them are on the other side of the universe that we can't see, but there's one that we can, and astronomers will figure out that those galaxies over there are in completely different looking than ours.
yeah,
And they're also going to see that there is a void several million miles wide, and that void is the space in between our universe and the next universe over.
fantastic. Yeah, growing when I was growing up, we would look at the night sky, and people would, even astronomers, would point to them and say that those were suns like our sun. Turns out those are galaxies. They're not
Yes.
suns.
Oh,
Those are
galaxy.
galaxies. They're entire galaxies with millions and sometimes billions of suns in them. Absolutely amazing to some of this information about here.
Yeah. When
Absolutely
they get
wonderful.
so far away, they just look like a little
Yep.
splotch.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Well, Tom, this has been great. We are kind of running out of time, and I want to keep it to a somewhat of a limit today. You and I could talk for ages. So
No,
it's been a real
we had a
honor
lot
to
of fun.
connect with you like this. Yeah, exactly. But I do want you to tell people where they can find your material.
Sure.
Tell us about your book, when it's coming out, and so forth, and then I'll ask you the final question.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, everyone. First of all, you can go to my website, which I mentioned before, which is www.thegentleWayBook.com. Now, on the website, um, on the very first page, you can sign up to get my free weekly newsletter. It's my gift to the world. I've done over 900 of these so far. They're all archived on the website under articles and news. So you can go there. There's even a search box where you can search words and phrases and see if I've asked a question about that. And if I haven't, send me the question.
Ask the
Um,
question. Yeah.
so uh, that's what you can do there. Then I, as we talked about, I have written 8 books. The next 2 are coming out um, in the next couple of weeks, called Conversations with Gaia, Soul of the Earth, and uh, but I've also, of course, would love for you to try the gentle way, because that works, and it works perfectly, the best you've ever seen. And that, uh, you know, try pick up one of my books and see if you like it.
Awesome. Tom, thank you so much for being here. One final question. We always like to kind of leave with something you'd like to offer people, just some hope or some dreams or some information that you'd like to share with people here today.
Oh, well, I hate getting into this too much in
Oh,
this,
go for it.
in this program, uh, but for everyone on the West Coast, there's going to be some major Earth changes next year, all the way from Tijuana through the Aleutian Islands, and that's why there's going to be a 3-foot rise in the oceans of the world. And uh, I in my book, I gave 5 options of what you can do. One would be to do nothing until the first 2 or 3 months of 2026, when there are going to be what are called precursor earthquakes. And these are going to be hundreds of earthquakes with a maximum of 6 to 6.5 in magnitude. But then that summer, that's when the biggies come with the 7, 8s, and 9s, and they will continue for months. So if you live in a place, as an example, Las Vegas is going to be a refugee center because there's thousands of hotel rooms and hundreds of flights per day. And so if you have a chance to help someone that lives on the West Coast um, escape, then I hope you can. I hope I'm wrong on that reception, but I've asked tons of questions, and I keep he Gaia keeps narrowing down on me.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all of your information with us here today. It's been, like I said, it's been a joy to connect with you, and we will have opportunities, and if we all hold hands, we can make these transitions much easier if we all work together rather than try to be separated all the time. So
That's
we'll
exactly
keep
right, and that's going to be in my next newsletter. If it wasn't in this one, I can't remember, but
excellent,
that's exactly
excellent.
the answer I got.
Tom Moore, thank you so much, my friend. I'm going to
Thank
leave you
you.
for now and finish up the not the virtual life, the backstory podcast. Thank you everybody for being here today. We hope that you got something out of this. We love to hear from you. Keep the hope up and know that you're never alone. This is Behind the Scenes with the Backstory podcast from Espavo. Espavo, everyone. Thank you for taking your power.